brother so-and-so or a priest. So Native Americans then took on basically Spanish or Mexican identities. So even looking back, you don't really get any genealogy because nobody bothered to say what their name was when they were up here. So then when the system emptied out and they were let go of the mission, some of them headed for the hills, some of them had already gotten away and came up here, Indian Canyon. And one Sebastian Garcia found out that if he, in 1887, the Great White Father decided that there probably were other Indians still living on land, not in the reservation system, but out and about. Well, anyway, a couple of people knew of Sebastian being up here, and there were a couple of families living up here. So anyway, what happened next was they told him about it. He went down to sign up. Well, that was in I'll go backtrack a minute. In 1885, in Marysville, they still had a poster in businesses that said $5 for a head of an Indian. So in 1887, they say, come in and sign up. Are you going to show up, you think? What? I don't know. If you could speak the language. Anyway, in 1897, he signed up. And the drag of paperwork went on. And in about 1911, Robert Taft, the president at that time, signed a trust patent deed for 25 years. What they did was say, you Indian can live on that land if it is not claimed by anyone else. And they would dole out 160 acres without benefit of irrigation and make a living off it. And when they did that, there was a big certificate that they got, like you got from high school or college, and a big band across the top. The band said, non-competent Indian. Anyway, he lived on, and as it turns out, there was consumption and tuberculosis in Hollister, and nobody ever bothered him to come check up on how things were going. Anyway, later, Anne Marie's mother inherited this, came up, and she was one tough woman. She would walk to town from here. How long did it take you to drive up here? She'd walk to town. And she had been in Watsonville in a convent, and they taught her the English language, and she was very, very proper. And she put the silverware here and the silverware there. So I can attest to that whenever I sat down to eat with Anne Marie. She said, oh no, I gotta have the good silver. Anyway. As it turns out, then Anne Marie came along and her brother Chris, and Anne Marie found out in the parcel that Sebastian had is basically here that you're on now. She found out there were 120 acres higher up where the cabin is now. And just to reinstate that, to try, a trust patent deed and an Indian Allotment Act was monumental in itself. She was tenacious to hang in there. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Bureau of Land Management says, give it a try. Okay, so she came up, and there was a gentleman by the name of Howard Harris from Hollister who had a bulldozer, started her working, stuff like that. And it looked pretty good. And me, I came from upstate New York. I'm part Abenaki. Minute enough, but anyway. I was hanging around Oxnard. I came west, and this woman accosted me one night, and she captured me and had me doing picture business on street corners, and then she told me the story. And I said, well, where is this place? She brought me up here, and I fell in love with what you see. This was brush. This was all a mess. Anyway, but there was a waterfall up there that I fell in love with. So I cajoled her, and I signed on a piece of paper that I'd give her a year or two of my life and not do anything else. And it started. So And it wasn't easy. Everything, they would check up. They say, you can't do this, you can't do that. And she got a letter one day that said they were going to rescind the right to try. She was devastated. Found out that letter was written by a woman in government who wrote, I believe, I think, and I asked Anne-Marie, I said, who is this woman? Has she ever been up here? Because by that time, we had actually started a cabin. And she said, no, never been up here. And the woman said, I. And I said, that's government. She's got to be a statute number 12-12-4-6. So we raised hell. Got Howard Harris, helpmate that he was for Anne-Marie and her family prior to her, happened to know the director of the Bureau of Land Management. Made a couple phone calls, and the woman was replaced because she said I, and she didn't say she was the government. Well, anyway, she was replaced. We continued. In 1988, just before Canyon was born, how did it go? In the mail came a little piece of paper, says you got it. Oh, great celebration, you know, they didn't come didn't bring any champagne, nothing like that. So, and we continued from there. But the one thing that did pick up on was then we would she decided to start storytelling and stuff like that to share. And the one thing the lady does, she loves to share. And she was tenacious to hang in the way she did. I happened to be along as a sidekick, and of course, we have this beautiful person from our union that I think you all know and love. You've seen her, Canyon. See, I told you some of you were okay. Do you believe it? Give her a hand. Come on, that's what a nice guy. And her mother, who, I mean, I don't know how she hung in there. And I hung in there with, loved it. As I stand here, I walked every inch of this when it had brush. Oh, back to Howard Harris. When we first got here, he brought me up on a mission of cutting brush. For 3 days, I cut brush. He got Anne-Marie aside, and he said, you got to keep him. She said, why? He doesn't get poison oak. Because a lot of people came up here and got a lot of poison oak, I'll tell you, over the years. So anyway, Anne-Marie has done a hell of a job, and as you folks have joined us here today, thank you. I came in from North Carolina because I love my daughter very much, and sometimes she don't get enough volunteers. Oh, one quick thing. I mentioned you had to live and work off the land. Anne-Marie decided to live and work off this land by having pygmy goats. How much money can you make with pygmy goats, you know? But anyway, she had a herd of 6 when we started. By the time we were done, had 36. And I'll tell you, we'd take them to powwows, took them to the Indian market. We'd give them, I made a petting zoo. I did a little, this was a coloring thing in 1988. And you can see why I was attracted to her at that particular time. And I had to put myself in, I was attracted to me at that time. But anyway, I made up a story about, and I used, like the Indians did, they used the turtle and the coyote and things like that. That was when the little kid would come up to his father and say, Father, why is this here? Why are we here? And you know, he had to make something up. So I made something up here about how the goats got to Indian Canyon and made a coloring story out of it. And what I'd do is make a kind of a newspaper, and then I'd get oats. When we take the goats out, we'd make a petting zoo. So we'd make $5, $4. We survived. Anyway, that I did as I got into my trunk and I pulled out a lot of stuff, which I also put other things that happened. But anyway, thank you for allowing me to speak at this particular junction. Most of the time, I've been in the background because it's safer that way. Have a good day.